Funky Politics.
Funky Politics Show.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics, powered by MLGW, Memphis Light Gas and Water.
Welcome back to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. And we've been supported by MLGNW. That's right, folks. Memphis Light Gas and Water. You know what? They've supported this show the last 2 seasons, and man, we are mighty glad about it. They're our hometown energy source, and MLGNW is the place to be. We appreciate you, MLGNW. Make sure you also go out there and subscribe and you rate our show. Make sure you go to your podcast provider, and that could be Stitcher, iTunes, or whatever, what have you. And make sure you rate and subscribe. Funky Politics. This is where we do it here. We do it here all the time. I'm DC, sitting right here next to my comfortable, most noble co-host, Doc Ward. Doc, what is up, my brother, this new season?
I'm on a new level, man.
Your new level?
I'm on a new level.
Man, that's a song. I'm on a new level.
Yeah.
I'm on a new,
but
I
it
like
ain't
that.
trap music we talking about.
I thought we
talking about something new, man.
All right.
Where you from? Where you at? Where you gonna be?
Yeah.
Whether you're repping your crib, holding it down for your hood, claiming your set, or just standing up for your city, we're talking about cities. In my Allen Iverson practice voice, we're talking about cities, man.
Real cities, man.
Cities,
Real
man.
cities. There you
cities,
go.
the actual city.
Yeah,
and the reason why we're talking about cities is because as our society continues to go onward, cities become more prominent.
Yeah.
Just a few years ago, maybe only 10 or 15% of people lived and across the world lived in cities. But now, over 50% of all folks in this world live in some urban area. And it is estimated by 2030 that either 60 to 70% of all of us will be living in some urban area.
And that urban area you're talking about, that's a city.
I'm talking about a major city
proper.
with a number of people where there is a consistent flow of services for healthcare, education, technology, innovations, transportation, all of those things. We're talking about 2030, just a matter of years. Most of our world will be in some urban area. It's no longer rural.
No
longer spaced out. No spaced out. No longer stretched out. No longer stretched out across the land or across any particular territory, but we will all be clustered together in the melting pot that we really talk about here in the United States. That won't just be here, that will be all across the world. And because that is the case, it's more important now that we look at cities not just as places where everyone dwells, but as centers for all the things that I mentioned before: healthcare, education, technology, creativity, innovations. All of those things are important. But also, it's important that we look at cities as microcosms of how we on a national level deal with certain things like poverty, inequity, inequality, crime.
From a cultural dynamic standpoint.
Right. Cultural collaboration, tolerance, and ultimately peace and understanding amongst the society.
Wow. That's a lot. On this show right here.
On this show right here.
Funky Politics.
If it's going to happen, if the real funk that's going to occur in this world over the next few decades, it's going to occur in the cities.
Wow.
Not just in Washington, D.C.
No, sir.
And not just in New York City, but in all cities. And we're going to have to learn to deal with it. As local becomes more important, because all politics are local and all politics are funky. So what a better way to kick this season off than to talk about the funky local politics in other areas of cities.
And speaking of that, one of the biggest cities in our country, I think has a lot of culture, a massive transportation system, a massive education system, is New York City.
Well, it is the biggest city.
Yeah, New York City, if
not in the world.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Would you say? I mean,
I would say
without
that.
the fact. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The largest city in the world.
Absolutely.
Even bigger than London.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Wow. Unless I'm missing something.
Well, and I'm not talking about in terms of mass, because we know in terms of mass, it's not the largest in terms of, I guess, square miles.
I'm talking in terms of people, and in terms of people,
culture, and
right. It is the largest. So what about New York?
There's a one gentleman there by the name of Mitch Silver, who happens to be the commissioner of parks and recreation
Mitchell
for a city that has better than what is it, 3 million plus?
3 million plus, but if you count the greater area, you're getting to 20 million people. I mean, it's an epicenter for, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Cities like New York aren't just places where just the people in the city come together.
That's right.
You've got an area that it reaches that goes clear to Connecticut, and then down to Philadelphia, even to Baltimore, even to Washington D.C. in some respects. So there are a number of people that depend on New York City directly for their daily bread that may not be living in New York.
That's right.
L.A. is another one. I know we're talking about Mitchell Silver, but there are several cities that are like that. That's why this series is so important.
And Mitch Silver actually didn't start in Parks and Recreation. He's a planning guy. He's a planning guy out of the East Coast over there. Well, not far from where he's at, out of Charlotte, and in that Triangle area. And he talks a lot about regionalism. Mm-hmm. How do we develop smart cities?
Right.
And the mayor of New York brought him on board from the APA, the American Planning Association. Said, "Look, I need somebody who can help me devise a plan to keep our citizens engaged and also to be able to see the beauty of what we do from a cultural standpoint right here in New York City." And Mitch is the guy.
Wow. And he's going to be joining us.
Right.
And we are privileged to have him because, while these rural areas may choose a president, the urban
I knew you were going to go there at some point.
Urban areas.
I knew you were going to go there at some point. I knew it.
The urban areas will choose how we live. They will dictate how we live, how we innovate, how we survive. And the populations that rely on those cities will determine where we go as a nation.
Not only New York, but you got cities like Atlanta, Nashville, Birmingham, Charlotte, New Orleans, Houston.
You say New Orleans?
Yeah, they did say New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Those folks that don't understand New Orleans, it's New Orleans.
New Orleans.
The Houston, Louisville, and even Memphis.
Right.
These are dynamic cities around the country that are hopefully most of them are on the upswing. There's some that are still kind of languishing a little bit, but we know that as we delve into this season, we're gonna be talking to a lot of people around the country.
And those cities that are in the South, where the South is actually coming up and actually in a transitional phase, we will be discussing those cities and many more across the nation. But for right now, we're going to talk about New York.
And I love New York. Oh, the holidays. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Especially the Thanksgiving parade they have there. And then, of course, the Christmas holidays as they're coming up. It's just beautiful in the city. I hadn't been in about 10 years, but I look to go back sometime soon. Hopefully sometime soon.
Well, we're going to go back and we're going to make it funky.
Maybe we can get Mitch Silver.
We're going to bring the funk to New York.
You're going to bring the funk to New York.
Mitch is going to hook us up.
Mitch going to take care of us, man.
There you go.
He said there's a new game they play in those parks up there. I want to know what that game is again and engage him on some things about how we can transform some of our other cities into these large urban spaces and talk about parks, talk about recreation, talk about planning.
And more importantly, talk about the things that we said before. Talk about dealing with inequities. Talk about cultural collaboration. Yeah. Talk about bringing people together for the greater good of our overall world community. So you all stick with us because we're going to come back and talk with you along with Mitchell Silver as we take a big funky bite out of that big apple called New York right here on Funky Politics.
Funky Politics. Funky Politics Show.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics. Y'all better keep listening.
Funky Politics, part of the KUDZUKIAN network.
KUDZUKIAN. Connect with MLGW.
We can help.
Go to MLGW.com for bill payment, analysis, service transfers, outage updates, and more. Connect to us on Facebook to share comments and ask questions. Follow us on Twitter at MLGW. Connect to our blog for news and updates.
Watch how-to videos on YouTube.
Connect by downloading iPhone apps. Get text message reminders. Stay connected with MLGW. We can help.
I'll play the blues for you.
Blues in the Basement with Stephanie and T. Shaw.
Some great festivals going on around the tri-state area.
Got your dancing shoes?
Man, as long as I'm with you, baby, I'm always be on my toes.
Drop that zero.
Bring your blues, boo.
I got them.
We'll see you.
Thank you.
Blues in the Basement.
Thrill is gone.
Blues in the Basement, part of the KUDZUKIAN network.
The thrill is gone away.
Funky Politics.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN network. You got your guy DC sitting here in the chair right along with Doc Ward. Doc, what's up?
What's up is we're going to talk about space.
Talking about space.
The final frontier.
Wow.
Yeah. Like Captain Kirk.
Do we have Leonard Nimoy on?
No, but you can serve in that purpose. You're just as weird as he is.
Oh, wow.
Or was, rather. May he rest in peace. We're going to talk about spaces, not just spaces, but green spaces.
Okay.
Green spaces being parks and their role in the development of our community. Now, if you live in the north, it's parks are used for observation. And if you live in the west, usually they're used for conservation. And if you live in the south, they're used for recreation. But if you live in the east, they're used for all three plus stabilization.
Wow.
And we have that stabilizing force, the man that's over it all, New York City. We're talking about number one. You're supposed to say New York City?
I was going to say,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to seem real country to Commissioner.
But you are real country. Be who you are. Be funky. Be
We've got
yourself.
Commissioner Mitchell Silver, who is the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for the City of New York.
City
Welcome
of New
to the
York.
program, sir.
Welcome,
How are
sir.
you?
Thank you. Glad to be here. Very excited.
Great. We want to jump right into this thing because Doc was just talking about space and talking about how we as a society, some of us are a little heavier than others, and I know I'm one of those people. And I'm working, sir. I'm
You're
working.
a heavy cat, man.
I'm a heavy cat.
Yeah.
But in your role as a Commissioner of Parks and Recreation in a city like New York, and I saw where you have what, about 30,000 acres? Is that what you supervise? I mean, basically
That's
manage?
correct. 30,000 acres, almost 2,000 parks.
2,000 parks.
Right. Like Central and Prospect.
How many employees? How many employees does it take to run an operation like that?
Roughly, when we're fully staffed, could be between 7,000 and 8,000. We have seasonals that come on board on our peak season, but we can go as high as 10,000 depending on the year. So it's a lot of people to keep our parks clean and safe.
Wow. And it's bigger than just parks. So we talked about the different things, of course, kind of joked around with observation and conservation and everything else. But in this growing trend of a growing population, not just in New York City and not just where we are, but worldwide, it's important to have green relief, is it not? It's important for people from all standpoints, it is, isn't it?
Yes, because we found that parks are not just for recreation or for physical health, it's also for mental health. In a city as dense as New York, if you do not have those parks and public spaces, this is a very difficult city to live. It enhances our quality of life. Density and open space go hand in hand, and you can't have a successful city without quality open space. I often say you sleep in your apartment or your home, but at least here in New York, we live in our public space.
Right.
That's where people go. It's our outdoor living rooms. It's where people connect. It's where they can escape from the busy life and just enjoy this beautiful canopy. And being in Greenspace just does something to your mind, your soul. And so for a city like New York, we get 130 million visits to our parks every year. Not visitors, visits. So that tells you the power of having public space. And so for us, you cannot have a quality city without quality public space, particularly as we grow. People now look for their apartment and find out where they walk their dog, where they can go for a stroll, where they can go fall in love. These are the spaces that make our city, in my opinion, what it is.
Wow. And let's wrap this up, really, because I don't think people will ever really appreciate how important parks are. They're used for different things depending on where you are and where you are in the United States. But it is basically in what you just described as wellness. It's about making the mind, the body, and the soul of the individual well so they can always perform at their optimum as human beings. Is it not?
That's true. In fact, I joke around and say we're not just the Department of Parks and Recreation. We're really the Department of Fun, Health, and Happiness. That is what we offer to the public. That it's critical that parks are seen as infrastructure that's vital to our daily lives. Fun, that's where people go to enjoy themselves. Health, where people can go and get healthy, both physical and mental. And then also happiness. Being around Greenspace just makes you happier. And so from our perspective, that better characterizes our department, and that's why we really push that label. It's not just recreation, it's fun, it's health, it's happiness.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. And I want to jump right back to that, Commissioner. Greenspace. When I think of New York City, I think of all of these tall buildings. I think of a lot of people. I think of congestion. One thing I've never thought about is just park. Now, Central Park. Everybody's heard of Central Park.
Yeah.
I think if you're 8 to 80, you've heard of Central Park. But I just can't imagine. You said 2,000?
2,000. But we also are. It is a large system, and each of the boroughs have large parks, but then we have a lot of neighborhood parks, smaller parks, playgrounds that are nestled throughout the city. A lot of people don't know those smaller parks, but that's what neighborhood people, in New York City, our goal is to have a park within a 10-minute walk of every home, every apartment. Right now, we're well over 80%, so that within a walking distance, there is a green space near your home. We want to increase that to 85% by 2030, because we know in a dense city, those are the spaces where kids play, where seniors can age gracefully, and where people can just get away from the hot temperatures. Being under a canopy of trees drops the temperature down by 10 degrees. And so we know that they're a savior to people here in our city. I don't know about other cities, but New Yorkers love their green spaces, just love them.
But what you're finding now is that even in places like even in the South, where you have even in suburban areas where people would ordinarily have backyards and everything else, now developers are building smaller backyards, but they're having these community spaces in the particular subdivision where people can go to a pool, or they can go to a place where they can just enjoy without being in their yards. And for me, that's even a bigger thing, because it's not just about the green space; it's about being social. And
exactly.
about
we focus on. I'm sorry. I apologize. We focus on the experience of place. People want to go to other places where they can connect. We can have a social gathering, a concert. We can have a community picnic.
Right.
It's very difficult to do that in your backyard. And we have all sorts of fun things happening in our parks. I also oversee beaches and a lot of tennis courts and a lot of other things, but people are looking for those places. We have silent discos where you put on a headphone and you dance under the stars. You can't do those things in your backyard. The city that doesn't understand the importance of those places where people connect with their neighbors, with their friends, with their family, that's not a fun city. And so we just want to make sure, even in the suburbs, they're figuring it out. And we have so many cool, interesting events. We have dinner en blanc. People come out wearing all white. They bring their tablecloths and wine and dine in our parks. It's amazing. And these are memories that people will cherish for the rest of their life. But it's very difficult to do that in a suburban parking lot or in someone's backyard. People thrive on those social places where they just can connect with their neighbors.
Well, one question. And I'm in love with Central Park. Have never been there, and I want to go. Is that America's largest public space?
Not even close.
What?
It's 844 acres, 543 acres. Our largest park is Pelham Bay, close to well over 2,700 acres. It's well known, but it's not our largest park, and nowhere near close to the largest park. Some of them, I believe, are out west, and some of the other. I can't remember the exact one, but I believe it's out west.
Right.
But no, it's not even our largest park. It's in the top 10, but it's not the largest park in New York City.
But also, and we talked about social and gathering, we've talked about the wellness aspect of it, but it's also an opportunity for people to celebrate and understand their diversity in order to be able to get along as citizens as well, isn't it?
Yes, parks were designed at the very beginning to be democratic spaces. They're free. Everyone, regardless of your age, your race, your gender, your religious background, the parks are for you. They're democratic spaces that you can come and enjoy. That's what makes our city so great. And so we make sure that we have an equitable park system, regardless of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But we also want the newer uses to reflect the local demographics. We have emerging Hispanic population, and soccer is now becoming more and more popular, so we're converting a lot of our baseball fields into soccer fields. Now cricket, lacrosse, South American volleyball.
Wow.
We stay very close tuned to all of the demographics to make sure we're providing a public space that meets the need of that local community, their culture, and so that they can go out there and enjoy themselves.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
So we know we've got health and wellness. We know we have social gathering, and we know we have celebration of diversity. To me, that makes parks and green spaces, and the ability for people to gather in these green spaces, one of the most important social aspects of our society. And with you being in the position that you are in, from a planning perspective, what do you see as sort of the future of how we need to plan these green spaces, how we need to plan them more strategically and more effectively throughout the United States, so that we can begin the process of really celebrating the best of each other and working collectively to improve our communities that are surrounding them.
I'll give you 3 examples. The first is that we have to understand the importance of equity. Over time, we have a large park system, but not all parks were treated equally. It is our goal to make sure, regardless of your neighborhood, that we invest fairly in each of our parks so that every neighborhood, every community can enjoy their local park. So to me, equity is key. We're doing that here in New York City. We took a look at how many parks did not really receive investment in over 20 years, and we decided under this mayor that those were the parks that we're going to target first and invest, and we're now transforming about 67 of these neglected parks that hadn't seen real change in 20 years. We opened the first one yesterday, so happened to be my birthday, which was the best birthday gift ever.
Happy belated birthday, by the way, too.
Thank you.
Happy belated birthday, and congratulations on your success.
Thank you. It was amazing to see the smile on the children's face, and it was a beautifully redesigned park from the ground up.
Which park was that, by the way?
This is called Van Alt's Playground in Astoria, Queens. And if you go online, we just put it on our website. It is stunning. And we got it done in 2.5 years. Number 2, we have this new program called Parks Without Borders. We're now blurring the lines between parks and the public street. New York City, 14% is a park space. 26% consists of streets and sidewalks. You combine that together, 40% of New York City is in the public realm. The average citizen does not know whether they're on parks property or transportation property, and guess what? They don't care. They want to have a seamless public realm, so the future of parks is we're rethinking the sidewalk and the street as a public space that can function just like a park. We're putting more openings, we're rethinking the sidewalk, putting more street furniture, because as our population ages, they want a place to sit. And we're looking at the sidewalk as the outer park and not having a fence or a wall separating the park and the sidewalk. We call that Parks Without Borders. That program is underway. Very successful. Lowering fences or eliminating them, merging public spaces, creating underperforming street and asphalt into incredible public spaces. So that is moving ahead. And the third is green infrastructure. We're now looking at our parks for stormwater, for air quality, for water quality, so they're now serving another purpose than just being a green space. So now we can actually be more sustainable and more resilient, particularly in an era of climate change. So now they serve additional purpose to keeping our cities safe and functioning well. So those are 3 ways of the future: equity, Parks Without Borders, more seamless public realm, and the third, green infrastructure.
Wow. I guess I would refer to it as sort of the three-eyed genius, you know.
I like that.
Three-eyed, really three-eyed. Inclusion, infusion, and infrastructure. And we've got the master of it all right here. And this is Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
I want to ask you a question that may be off the beaten path a little bit. What's South American volleyball?
It is volleyball played with a soccer ball. And so the weight of the ball is a bit different. Why it's used as a soccer ball, I need to ask them one day, but it is similar to soccer. And then pickleball is also picking up as well. Pickleball is a combination of ping pong and tennis. It's played with a paddle, if you ever played handball with a paddle, and a wiffle ball. So the seniors in Florida actually kind of came up with the sport. They couldn't play tennis like they used to because when you hit the wiffle ball, it doesn't have the same velocity. But it is so much fun. It is spreading like crazy in New York City. We can't keep up with the demand. It's called pickleball. If you play tennis, you score it similar to ping pong, but it's a court, and you hit that ball, you think you're going to kill and spike someone, and that thing just floats slowly, and that person, 70 years old, will cut you and make you look bad.
I think I can play that. I think I can play it. I'm not sure.
You couldn't play against an octogenarian man with his hand tied behind his back.
That's not fair.
Beat me every time.
Or we could just play DC's favorite sport, sitting.
I like that. And see, when you talk about the sitting part and the parks without the fences, all of this is cutting edge stuff. I've never heard of these types of games, and that's why I said, what is South American volleyball? What's pickleball?
The kids play pickleball now in elementary school.
They do?
The one time a week they probably get out for physical education, and that's why I think it's just so important that we look at parks not just as beautiful green spaces to just enjoy and recreate, but these things parks are very important staples in our communities. We're talking about healthcare right now.
Yeah.
But we're talking really about sick care. We're not talking about health care. We got to focus more on wellness and less on sickness. If we focus more on wellness as we start, we won't have to focus more on sickness as we get older. And what Commissioner Silver's talking about is older people getting out and recreating with younger people. Yeah. South American volleyball with American volleyball is just a mixture of cultures, a mixture of people, a mixture of ages, a mixture of everything. Because that's what our country is. Yeah. And I hate to try to take it to just the nth degree, but this is real stuff. It's real.
Yeah.
It is, and we have a whole team that focuses on what we call Tier 2 sports. We hear about something, we test it out. I'm always hearing about it, and we have a whole team of recreation programming that's always looking for what we call these new emerging Tier 2 sports. They're willing to try. It's a pilot. If it works, it works. But pickleball is something that we heard about it from Florida. It came up here, and because we have a lot of folks and snowbirds, they brought pickleball with them, and now it is exploding like crazy.
Well, now we know coming to Central Park, we're going to have D.C. and the International Sitting Championships right there in the middle of the park, and he's the reigning champion right now.
I'll take on the commissioner any day with that. Oh, my God, I tell you. You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Funky Politics.
I'm honored to be a part of Funky Politics.
We see downward, they're on Funky Politics. KUDZUKIAN.
Staring in the mirror, gonna change my ways. I wanna make Memphis a better place. I see a neighbor in need. What can be done? Instead of buying shoes or a pretty dress with just $1 a month, you can help the rest. It starts with you. Plus one.
You know, giving back through Plus One will make a difference for families in crisis.
It starts with you. Plus one. Grandma's message couldn't have been any clearer. If you want to change Memphis, look in the mirror. It starts with you. Plus one.
I remember when we got help from Plus One.
And now we're helping others.
Hey, Memphis, you can make a change.
You too can make a difference.
Funky Politics.
Doing it in the park. Doing it after dark. Oh yeah, Concrete Park. Oh yeah, Concrete Park. Doing it in the park. Doing it after dark. Oh yeah.
Once again, Funky Politics, and it's always powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. DC sitting in the chair here right along with Doc Ward. Doc, my good friend, how are you, sir?
I'm wonderful because we're doing it in the park. We're not doing it after dark. And whether you're Rock Creek, whether it's Central, whether it's Grant, Millennium, or anywhere else, we're talking about parks, green spaces, and the importance thereof to the growth and development, further growth and development of our great nation. And we're talking about it with the foremost authority, with the foremost information from the foremost city in the world, Commissioner Silver.
How are you, Commissioner Mitchell Silver? Welcome to the program, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, DC Dr. Ward. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Getting right into this thing. You are the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for the City of New York. Also, your claim to fame is as well is that you were the past president of the APA, which is the American Planning Association. Am I not right?
That is correct.
Wow. So how did you segue from planning to a parks and recreation? And then I'm assuming it has a lot of tie-in.
It does have a lot of tie-in. This is my first foray exclusively into parks. As a planner, you're basically like a doctor for cities, and you have to understand the entire anatomy. So as you plan cities, parks is clearly a component of that planning. So it was a transition because parks involves a lot of overseeing operations, but the mayor wanted a visionary. He wanted someone that wanted to understand where the park system was going to move into the future, and so he brought me on board. plus years in planning has served me well, because now we're actually thinking, what is a 21st century park system in a 21st century city? And so with that, a lot of planning had to come into play.
Yeah, well, you know what you just did, don't you? You owned your circumstance. You said the mayor wanted a visionary, so here I am.
He's a modest man. You're talking to a modest man, right?
You know, no, when you're good at it, it just slips on out, and you don't even have to say it.
Nobody has to ring your bell.
The mayor wanted a visionary.
And that's what he
to me, having a vision and a visionary are two different things. To have a vision
yes, sir.
or be a visionary, you have to have three things. You have to have hindsight, insight, and foresight. And so over the years, I've learned the ability to have all three, because you need that peripheral vision of both past, present, and future to actually be a visionary. So that's something I take pride in. Over 30 years, I've tried to hone that understanding. You can't go forward unless you understand what's happening now and what happened yesterday.
Wow. So with your retrospect, your introspect, and your prospect, and then applying your visionary craft to what you do, what do you see, and what's the process and the approach that you're taking in developing parks as part of a staple of community development in New York City? And what do you see for that for the nation as a whole?
Well, first, we have to understand the problem we're solving. Too often when you go into a planning process, people want to just say, what do you want to see? That's asking the wrong question. You first want to understand what are the critical problems that you're dealing with, and essentially do a diagnostic so you understand that you're crystal clear, the public is crystal clear, and you're all on the same page. You could be a growing city. You could be a shrinking city. Whatever your circumstance is, everyone has to be crystal clear on the problem you're solving. Once you figure that out and there's consensus, then you can slowly start to figure out what you need to do. To me, that's first and foremost.
Right.
That was any job I've held, including here in New York City. Once you understand that, then you start walking through those scenarios. Understand and commit that's going to take dollars up front. As a planner, I don't believe in dreaming. I believe in doing. And if you want to plan, whether you're planning to build a house, capital comes along with it. And you have to understand, if you want to have a plan, you have to make sure there has to be public will, political will, and also capital, which is dollars, to get it done. And then the public on board, you can solve those problems together, make those choices, solidify the plan, and then move forward. Most people miss that point, and they jump to, what would you like your city to look like in the future? Wrong question. The true question is, what are the issues you need to solve to take your city to where you want it to be?
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. You know, Commissioner, in terms of this planning, and I see something in the South, I see our country really kind of fragmented. And a lot of our urban cores, the Memphises, the Jackson, Mississippis, and some of the other larger cities that have a large black-brown population, the outer rim, I guess, of the suburbanites typically have grown up because of the core, that urban core now. And I don't see a lot of regionalism. I see a lot of it's us out here now, but it's them in that city now. How do we tear that wall down, so to speak?
I think most people don't understand that a metropolitan area includes a central city or cities and suburban areas, urban core and suburban areas. Mick Cornett, the mayor of Oklahoma City, says something very powerful I never forgot. You cannot be a suburb of nothing.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
You cannot be a suburb of nothing.
Right.
The reason the suburbs exist is that there was a central city, an employment center that was there, and then around it, the suburban areas grew, primarily residential. What has happened because of the concern about, let's just say, the quality of life in the urban core, people fled to the suburban areas, and then the employment centers followed. So now we have these metropolitan areas that have multi-centers, and the urban core has started to decline because all the income, wealth, and jobs moved out to the suburbs. But for us to be successful, you cannot compete as a suburb on your own. Whether it's Memphis or New York or Raleigh, North Carolina, you have got to compete as a region. And those regions that don't get it will lose their competitive advantage to those regions that do get it. For example, Raleigh, North Carolina, they understand they have a core and they have a suburb. They work together to compete against the Austin metros or the Silicon Valley metros. They don't fight within their suburban location where one town competes against the other. That's a losing battle. They're too small. So going to the future, those regions understand they have to work together and compete together will succeed, because you rise as a region or you fall as a region. If you have a weak urban core, it hurts your region.
Yeah.
You just can't move out and saying, well, we're just going to dismiss you and do it on our own. You can't. And if you look across the country, you see those regions that support their urban core and understand that a successful urban core will actually be successful for the entire region.
One thing I want you to also talk about that we didn't really, the first thing that you said when you were talking about things that you need to do was, understand what the issues are of an area and what they're dealing with. But also, cities have to be honest with themselves about where they are against their competition or wherever it is in terms of their vision. A lot of cities have an identity crisis that think that they're a lot bigger and a lot better and a lot more sustainable than they really are, don't they? So don't they have to have some kind of real understanding of who they are and be honest with themselves about what's going on there? If crime is driving down your core, or if lack of economic attainment is driving down your core opportunity, then you have to be honest with that and work on solutions to change that. But it seems that a lot of cities don't have that. Do you ever run across that issue, and how do you solve that? How do you solve that city reconciling itself?
Yeah, people use a lot of hype. They brand themselves, and in some cases it just does not match. I won't give you examples of cities, but there are many that try to hype themselves up. But business is looking for the right opportunity, and they'll do their own homework and understand what is the true nature of that city. I agree with you. A city needs to do diagnostics. I'd mentioned planners being doctors of cities. When I go to the doctor, and I will next week for my annual checkup, he's going to run some tests. I can tell him all the hype, I'm running, I'm eating well, and he'll take those tests and he'll say, something? You're lying to me. Because these tests are telling me something very different. This is what we have to work on. Cities need to regularly take a pulse or the diagnostics to understand where they stand, but you need to compare yourselves to other places so you can see how you measure up. I always tell people, when I was a consultant, you take the diagnostics and you pick those other cities, those other regions that you want to compare yourself to, and then you can see how you measure up and what you need to work on. When I was in Raleigh, we did diagnostics on a regular basis to see where we stood. We had different index to show how we compared to our competitors, and we knew what we had to work on. So that's something I encourage all cities to do. Have your doctor's visit every year, take the diagnostics to see how healthy your city is, so you know what prescription you need and you know what to work on.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
And the other thing about suburbs, you were saying that it is a suburb. It is under an urban area, hence suburban. But a lot of suburbs believe that sub means substitute, and it's substituting the urban area. So how do you tame the suburbs so that they don't try to take over the urban area and thus lose the real effect of the core city being there? How do you manage to regulate, or at least I'd say regulate it, but how do you manage to facilitate that?
I think the demographics and the cost of infrastructure will be the biggest challenge for suburbs going into the future. As we see demographics change, we see that the predominant household by 2030 is going to be one person. One person. Not a family, one person. So the suburbs going into the future, it'll be very difficult for a single person to say, I'm going to live out into the suburbs and buy a home. That's probably not going to happen. So number one, demographics and what we see with the household size shrinking is going to be the most major threat to the suburbs into the future, number one. Number two, the amount of infrastructure and money it takes to maintain roads and sewers of these suburban areas will be very difficult to suburbs to support into the future. They're going to need larger areas. They may need to incorporate with a city that has a stronger tax base. So when you look at the future about where both empty nesters and millennials and young people are choosing to live, looking at the household size and the land values and the cost of infrastructure, the suburbs have a very scary future. I'm hoping they'll start to create a sense of urgency now to prepare for that 2030 future that's coming. But this is where I think suburbs may be forced to the table because both demographics and the cost of sustaining infrastructure is going to be one of their biggest challenges.
Commissioner, let me ask you this one piece here. If we don't want to create, I guess, an any animosity in terms of when we talk about the suburban commuters and folks who do tend to want to stay and work and do whatever in those areas. Do toll roads create any type of factionalism, or does it enhance or does it detract from a regionalistic standpoint? In the Memphis area, we've got 3 states. We've got Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So I don't know if that helps us or does it hurt us.
Well, people have to first understand, this is always a touchy subject, that the most heavily subsidized piece of infrastructure on the planet happens to be the highway. It doesn't pay its own way. Yeah. Someone is subsidizing those roads. So a toll road that may be approached as somewhat of a user fee helps support that infrastructure. And so it is something that I think is appropriate that needs to put on the table. When someone argues against toll roads and don't want to use it, they'd have to explain to that person exactly how that road is supported. They'll say, I pay taxes. No, doesn't cover the cost. It doesn't cover the cost. So in some cases, a toll road is appropriate mechanism. I know what people say. They'll find other ways of getting to their destination. That may be the case. But we do have to put all options on the table about how we're going to pay for our infrastructure in the future, because right now, roads, as of today, are heavily, heavily subsidized by other people who don't use those toll roads and other taxpayers who don't even own a car.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. You know, on this program, we try to keep it real, right, and funky all the time. And in terms of keeping it real, right, and funky, when we talked a little bit earlier about factionalisms and you got the urban cores and the browning and the black and the browning of America, you talked about in some of your studies where in 2020. 2044, I think, there will be no majority race. I mean, you're
Correct.
talking about basically being spread out. The love is going to be spread around. So now,
right.
But aren't you still going to have that one group of folks, and we don't want to call who they are, going to still believe that they're superior or that they are still the majority race?
Let me put it this way. The encouraging signs that we're seeing is that of the X and Y, and really more so Y and Z population, they're a lot more socially tolerant than previous generations. So as we move into the 2030s and 2040s, the people who are moving into leadership power will be those millennials today and now the Gen Z that's following them. So I'm more optimistic about the future. There's no question there'll be some that will be uncomfortable about this lack of, let's just say, white majority in the country.
Sure.
I do believe over time, as we see this younger generation that does not see color the way the current generation does, that it won't be as bad, in my opinion. I'm more optimistic about the future. You already have cities that are majority-minority, and they're doing quite well. New York is one of them. L.A., I can go down the list.
Right.
So a lot of people think about what does it mean 2044 when there's no majority race. We don't have to imagine that.
Right.
Some hear that and get afraid. What does it mean? All you need to do is look at states and cities that have already that crossed that threshold, and they're doing quite well. Their economies are strong. Crime is under control. These cities are thriving. These states are thriving. So I'm more optimistic, but there will be growing pains as people are fearful about what does that change mean and what does it look like. And so people will act out in certain ways to protect their interests, but I'm optimistic. The younger generation embrace values very differently, and they're the ones who will be in leadership by the 2030s and 2040s. So I remain optimistic about this demographic shift that's happening in our country.
And is there an effective planning solution that you might have that may in some way curtail any of that animus that may exist? I mean, we know we already have cities that are majority non-white, but the non-white culture is the majority culture, rather. But is there a planning solution for that in your
I don't know if there's a
arsenal?
planning solution. What we try to do in all the work, whether it's parks or city planning, is we look carefully at the demographics. When I go into a room and I'm having a town hall meeting or I'm out at a barbecue doing outreach, I want to make sure the demographics and the outreach I do and the input I get reflect the demographics of that city, of that town. I don't want to skew one way or the other because I truly want to understand from age, generation, ethnicity, what am I hearing? And to me, that's the best planning approach you can take, because to me, diversity is hearing the the opinions of different people, not white, not black.
Yeah.
It is hearing the opinions of different people, because as you hear that diversity of voices, you can plan and produce a better outcome than just hearing one voice from one group.
It sounds to me like then what you're saying is the key to mental, physical, cultural, and diverse health is an effective city planning, and every city needs to be, and I would say, about the business of developing an effective and inclusive city plan.
I agree.
Yeah.
I could tell you one thing: cities that have a plan are better off than cities that don't. In one of my previous jobs, I headed up economic development, and when a business would come to town and say, we want to open up a business here, and they said, what's your plan for the future? I put it down and said, here it is. This is where our water's coming from. This is where the roads are going. This is where the schools are going. And they were like, you got your act together. I want to invest here. I know exactly what is going to happen in the city. I don't just want to be here for 5 years and just take my roots and run. I want to establish this business here for the long term, because I have certainty about where the city is going in the future. Cities that have plans are better off than those that don't.
Well, it sounds like, just to quote, every city needs to have a plan, and if you don't have one, to quote Vice President Mike Pence, get one. And you're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Doing it in the park, doing it at the dark. Oh yeah, Concrete Park. Oh yeah, Concrete Park. Doing it in the park, doing it at the dark. Oh yeah, Concrete Park. Oh yeah, Concrete Park.
Funky politics.
DC.ward.
With no tricks.
Funky.
We're number one, KUDZUKIAN.
If I don't find something soon, my lights are going to get turned off.
How am I gonna cook for these guys with no power?
I've already applied for so many jobs. I hope I can get this one so I can pay my utility bill.
What's this? Well, there's the perfect way to help my family and friends. Help someone you care about through MLGW's Gift of Comfort program.
I'll play the blues for you.
Blues in the Basement with Stephanie and T-Shawn.
Some great festivals going on around the tri-state area.
Got your dancing shoes?
Man, as long as I'm with you, baby, I'm always be on my toes.
Drop that zero.
Bring your blues, boo.
I got him.
We'll see you.
Thank you.
Blues in the Basement.
Thrill is gone.
Blues in the Basement, part of the KUDZUKIAN Network.
The thrill is gone away.
KUDZUKIAN.
Funky Politics.
Yeah, places and spaces out there. Funky Politics. That's how I like it, man. This guy laid it down, Doc. He laid it down, man.
Man, you're mighty enthusiastic, man.
I am enthusiastic.
I'm glad.
Enthusiastic.
I'm glad. Very
enthusiasm.
Good. Very good. Well, you know, we used to talk politics, presidents, pundits, and punks. But we got something else for you to bump in your trunks.
Uh-oh.
Our series on cities will move your soul, telling these stories that must be told. We give you the knowledge so you don't have to go to college, so you can be a scholar for that almighty dollar. Just turn into Funky Politics, or tune in to Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Let your mind be free, and you know what's going to follow.
Man, you're a black poet. I would call you a poet. I would call you a poet.
A poet.
A poet. Black poet.
Oh.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, though,
Call me a poet? Is it like a boat?
Like a good friend of mine, but anyway.
A poet.
You know what? Let me
What
tell you.
city you from?
From Houston, but anyway. Let me say
Anyway.
this. Mitch Silver and what they have done in the city of New York with their green space, with their space, is amazing. And he laid that thing out for us, and he's given us a roadmap. I mean, he's a planning guy anyway, so he's given us a roadmap. And all these other cities we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of our season, the Atlantas, the Nashvilles, the Memphises, the Charlottes, the New Orleans. How do we maximize these green spaces so that culturally we can be really that great? Our president says, "Make America great again." You make America well, yeah, but he says you make America great again because it's already great. But our people can come together. That melting pot that we've all been talking about for these low 200 years. Places like green spaces can help us mend a lot of those wounds. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're exactly right. But more importantly, and maybe not more importantly, but equally important, is that we're talking about how to take something like parks represent so many different things.
Yeah.
They represent places of recreation. They represent places of reflection and relaxation. They represent places of, as you said before, coming together of cultures. They represent places where people can meet and discuss how to improve their communities. They represent places where people can be served, those that need it in a community. So in essence, starting out dealing with parks is starting out dealing with the basis of a city.
Yeah.
You understand?
I
because
agree
before there was any buildings, before there's any service centers, before there's anything else,
I know where you're going
you
with
start
this,
out with just land.
That's right.
And people.
Greenspace.
And people. And when you start out with just land and people, those people have to come together to figure out how to make the land upon which they are positioned.
How did they do it in New York, though? I mean, they're doing it. It's a huge melting pot. You got all of these diverse groups here, and all of them are pulling at $1. But to see, I think, Doc, and I know you know a lot about planning, but to see how it comes together with the largest urban park in America, so to speak, being Central Park. You got all types of people going through there. You got married. You got people that are getting engaged, and other people are getting married in the park. You got people who don't have any homes, and they're sleeping in the park as well. So you got all of this culture out there.
Well, you have to understand, first of all, that everybody has a choice.
Yeah.
And everybody has a voice. And everybody has a reason. And everybody has a season.
Yeah.
And respecting those things and those times and places of people is not just a political dream.
Yeah.
It's our first objective as human beings to respect one another, to learn to be love and care, at least be halfway concerned or even just respectful of one another. And if we can begin with that, beginning with respect and some land and learn how we can work together to improve, our cities everywhere can be not just New York City, but can be something greater than anything we've ever imagined. But in the meantime, it's time for us to get off our heels, get on our wheels, and head on to another city in another week. But regardless of the series or whatever we discuss, we remind you that right here, we always keep it 3 things.
That's right.
Real.
That's right.
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And funky.
Gotta keep it funky.
So tune in to us on our series on cities, our third season to be exact.
That's right.
Right here on Funky Politics, empowered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Funky Politics executive producer Larry Robinson for KUDZUKIAN. Hosted by Daryl D.C. Catron and Marcus M.D. Ward. Guest bookings by Miko. Funky Politics recorded at KUDZUKIAN Studio. Directed, produced, recorded, and distributed by KUDZUKIAN.